Everyone investigating this mystery missed a massive clue hiding right around the corner from Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Chione's place. We need to talk about this completely overlooked fueling station. Tucked inside sits a cryptocurrency kiosk specifically designed to purchase, review, and cash out digital money. Right after Nancy Guthrie vanished into thin air, those extortion demands specifically requested virtual currency. Federal agents actually showed up at this exact convenience store. They bypassed her neighborhood, entirely zeroing in exclusively on the location bordering her family's property. I uncovered this hidden gem deep within a messy timeline everyone mapped out wrong. Pulling on that single thread unraveled a whole mess of connected secrets. On the 11th of January, the very evening a shadowy figure lurked outside, an individual searched Nancy Guthrie's residential address online. That digital footprint traced straight back to Tucson, entirely unmasked. Tucson, the exact municipality where Annie and Tommaso reside, just 4 miles from the victim. The identical town where Derek Kayla busted for messaging virtual currency, extortion threats, fired off his demands while ignoring Savannah. Instead, he pinged Tommaso Chione's private mobile device. That realization led me to examine a glaring piece of evidence ignored since day one. Something begging for a brutally simple explanation. Her vital cardiac prescriptions sat completely abandoned on the kitchen island. She needed them by 10 at night, just 10 minutes after arriving. Police insisted she would die within 24 hours without them. Whenever you snatch a human being for cash, keeping your captive breathing until payday is the ultimate goal. So grabbing those medications is absolutely essential. The bottles sat in plain view, requiring maybe 5 seconds to grab, yet they stayed put. I devoted my past week to dissecting every extortion letter and chronological puzzle piece. I scrutinized every leaked fragment regarding the dialogue between the self-proclaimed abductors and the search party. What became glaringly obvious is that this whole abduction for profit narrative is fundamentally flawed. The core premise driving this massive investigation ever since Cameron Guthrie floated the idea during that initial dispatch completely falls apart. The abandoned prescriptions destroy it, the written demands contradict it, and the geographic reality shatters the entire illusion. Now I'm going to expose exactly what destroyed that narrative. Hit subscribe, activate your alerts, and let us dive in. Extortion letters started flooding in during the initial week of February. Distinct messages targeted various individuals, and the granular details within these communications have never been comprehensively pieced together before. The initial letters surfaced on the 2nd and 3rd of February, a mere 24 to 48 hours following Nancy's vanishing. They insisted on $4 million in cryptocurrency by 5 in the evening. Failing to hit that strict time frame meant the extortion fee would skyrocket to $6 million by 5 o'clock on February 9th. These letters bluntly warned her survival hung in the balance, leveraging menacing ultimatums attached to their clocks. They provided a virtual money destination that investigators confirmed was a legitimate ledger. This proved it was an entirely operational digital vault capable of accepting incoming transfers. Now let me reveal the contents that should have dominated global headlines. The author strategically dropped highly classified facts concerning the crime scene, specifically mentioning destruction to exterior illumination at the residence. They pinpointed the precise indoor resting spot of her smartwatch, leveraging extremely sensitive intel completely shielded from the public media. This was knowledge exclusively available to an individual physically standing inside those walls the very evening Nancy vanished. Let that sink in. The mastermind drafting these demands was either prowling the interior, getting close enough to spot the gadget and shattered bulb, or they got spoon-fed the details by the actual intruder. No alternative explanation exists. You simply do not magically predict where a wearable gadget is resting inside a dwelling you have never visited. A major outlet secured a primary manifesto. Harvey Levin publicly described it as meticulously structured, visually balanced, and featuring highly advanced vocabulary. We are not talking about some frantic scribble on a napkin. This document was methodically arranged and authored by an exceedingly literate individual. Yet somehow the guy loitering on the stoop, the masked figure caught on camera, hauling a cheap camping bag, strapped his weapon rig completely wrong over his jacket. He shoved foliage over the lens and moved with the situational clumsiness of an amateur who had never handled a firearm before. These two character blueprints violently clash. The brilliant mind composing the extortion letters definitely was not the bumbling fool loitering outside. Their intellect and capabilities are completely mismatched, heavily implying a coordinated crew featuring distinct roles. Alternatively, those letters were fabricated post-incident by somebody desperate to frame this as a financial shakedown. Fast forward to February 11th, when a fresh message hit the tabloids from an unknown sender. This one requested a single digital coin hovering between $66,000 and $77,000 back then, promising the abductor's identity. The author presented themselves as an outside observer holding secrets. Now pay attention to the massive red flag everyone missed. This anonymous tipster insisted they attempted reaching out to relatives directly deliberately targeting Annie and Cameron while entirely bypassing Savannah. Annie and Cameron happened to be the duo located right there in Arizona, perfectly positioned as the siblings most intimately connected locally. Why on earth would an independent informant holding golden intelligence bypass the famous relative and choose to engage Annie and Cameron? They totally ignored the sibling possessing massive wealth, wielding a gigantic media spotlight, and whose celebrity status allegedly sparked everything. Perhaps this outsider suspected the dirty truth hit much closer to home for Annie and Cameron, assuming the real answers lay hidden in Tucson rather than out in New York. By February 18th, another message dropped. They switched digital currencies entirely, far more violent and intimidating. It brutally outlined the penalties for ignoring their brand new virtual wallet. Federal authorities quickly liaised with Mexican law enforcement regarding this threat. Then the communications abruptly ceased. Not a single public extortion attempt since mid-February. 7 straight weeks of absolute silence. Out of nowhere, Savannah dropped an absolute bombshell during her interview with Hoda, validating a rumor floating around like a ghost. She confessed one extortion letter read exactly like an apology. The author basically bled remorse onto the page, openly admitting they were completely blind to Nancy's severe vulnerabilities. They claim total ignorance regarding her severe cardiac limitations. I need you to pause and absorb the sheer absurdity of that. You expect me to believe a psychopath ripped an 84-year-old grandmother from her mattress at 2 in the morning without footwear? Leaving her pills behind, this predator suddenly drafts a letter crying, "Apologies, we missed her frailty." Real underworld operatives simply do not act this way. Abductors never communicate with that kind of sympathy. Looking back through 60 years of hostage negotiations, you will never find a criminal apologizing to relatives about unexpected medical issues. That scenario is absolute fiction. It never occurs because monsters capable of terrorizing Nancy Guthrie completely lack the psychological capacity to experience guilt, much less document their sorrow for the family. Get this, the killer's own letters totally expose their lie. Initially, we see ruthless calculating ultimatums filled with strict cutoffs and aggressive extortion tactics from an author holding all of the cards. Yet that final confession feels eerily affectionate, brimming with gentle remorse. You simply cannot convince me one individual penned both messages. We are looking at completely distinct psychological profiles here. One reads like a ruthless corporate takeover strategy, while the other sounds exactly like a grieving friend dropping off casseroles. This massive shift in vibe proves either multiple people were involved or their underlying motive radically shifted. Those initial letters were carefully crafted to mimic a textbook hostage situation. Meanwhile, that bizarre confession letter was purely a manipulation tactic meant to pacify grieving relatives and shut down the investigation. It was a desperate attempt to frame Nancy's demise as a tragic mistake during a robbery rather than a calculated execution by an insider. Let's break down the actual timeline. Those main extortion letters showed up on February 2nd and 3rd, hitting within 48 hours of her vanishing, yet the initial payment window closed on February 5th at 5 p.m. We are talking 4 full days post-kidnapping. Real kidnappers holding a live captive for cash never sit around for 4 days. They verify the victim's status instantly. They force them on a call or they snap a quick picture holding the morning paper. Extortionists rely on panic to get paid, making speed their biggest weapon. These culprits set strict timelines without ever proving they actually held a living person, failing to provide even a single picture. 0 audio clips, absolutely no footage, and completely empty threats without any sign that Nancy Guthrie still breathed when they mailed those demands. Her loved ones desperately fired back, and Savannah joined her siblings to broadcast public pleas. Standing before the media, they announced, "Your terms are clear and we completely agree to them. Please just bring our mom home safely. She means everything to us and the cash is yours." Those televised pleas went viral. Authorities floated a massive $1 million bounty. Yet absolute silence followed. No drop-off occurred. They never texted wire details. They offered 0 verification she survived. They totally ghosted. Clocks ran out, the mail dried up, and that massive payout remained untouched. Former federal investigator Steve Moore argues that nobody snatched that huge payout because the only folks holding the answers are the murderers themselves. That insight comes straight from years of profiling killers. Had random thugs actually grabbed Nancy for a quick score, that $1 million bait would have shattered their silence months ago. Loose lips sink ships. A partner, a bunkmate, or some drunk pal at the bar would have definitely snitched. Whenever external criminals run a hostage scheme, cash bounties essentially guarantee someone flips. However, when the perpetrators are the sole witnesses, everyone keeps their mouths shut to avoid a cell block. That is assuming this wasn't a real abduction at all. What if the mastermind desperately needed her relatives, especially Savannah, to stop digging too close to home? The goal was tricking her into accepting a botched home invasion narrative, rather than facing the grim reality of an intimate betrayal. A random crook accidentally killing a hostage is heartbreaking, but a pre-planned execution orchestrated by a close associate is a totally different nightmare. That pathetic excuse claiming ignorance about her cardiac condition serves as the sole barrier shielding the actual truth. Let's discuss her prescriptions, which instantly destroy the entire extortion narrative using basic common sense. By the morning of February 1st, Nancy's crucial cardiac pills remained completely undisturbed on the island. She desperately needed that specific dose right around 10 p.m. Friends brought her back home by 9:50. Those vital tablets sat right out in the open, completely unobscured, in a plastic vial. Local law enforcement confirmed on the nightly news that missing her dose could trigger fatal consequences within 24 hours. Medical professionals firmly agreed she wouldn't last past 72 hours tops. Anyone actually running a legitimate hostage-for-cash racket knows keeping the merchandise breathing is priority number one, meaning you grab those prescriptions immediately. Those tablets literally represented the key to securing that massive payout. Letting her perish completely destroys any bargaining power you hold. Criminals don't need a pharmacy degree to figure this out. A deep understanding of heart disease isn't required at all. You simply sweep every single vial off the counter and stuff them in your pockets. It literally takes 5 seconds. You've already broken in and you're already dragging the victim out. Yet those crucial bottles stayed put, and the bizarre clues don't stop with the drugs because her cell sat abandoned by her bed. Real hostage takers absolutely rely on smartphones to orchestrate their demands. That device is how you confirm your captive is still breathing. You hold it up so she can tearfully beg her kids for help. At the very least, you steal the device to prevent cops from tracing her location. But they ignored the mobile device completely, bypassed her handbag, left the physical bills untouched, and completely abandoned her vital prescriptions. They only snatched Nancy, which points to 3 distinct scenarios. First, maybe they had zero clue about her failing health, though that completely clashes with their otherwise meticulous preparation. We are talking about 3 full weeks of stalking. They disabled security feeds, practically memorized the floor plan, and even mapped out garden planters to navigate the pitch-black yard. Nobody executes that flawless break-in just to overlook life-saving drugs sitting right out in the open. The second option is they simply didn't care. Proving murder was the ultimate goal all along. That extortion angle was clearly a frantic post-murder alibi, or just an afterthought compared to the actual hit. The final possibility is that extreme panic made them forget the drugs when their perfect scheme imploded indoors. This is exactly why those earpieces break the case wide open. Nancy rigorously removed her heavy-duty audio amplifiers every single evening before going to sleep. Deprived of that technology, her world went completely silent. Imagine an intruder storming into her room barking, "Get out of bed now. Move your feet and keep your mouth shut." Nancy wouldn't have registered a single syllable. She physically couldn't follow instructions because the threats fell on deaf ears. Picture looming over an 84-year-old lady in the dead of night, shouting directions while she just stares blankly, completely frozen. She completely ignores your demands, and since you missed the memo about her severe hearing loss, tension skyrockets. Panic sets in almost instantly. A sudden shove, a violent slap, she crashes hard into the bedside table, and now a messy crime scene emerges. That exact chain of events. The missing earpieces, the ignored threats, the sudden violence. The traumatic wound perfectly accounts for those crimson stains near the main door. It completely solves the mystery of the pristine living room, contrasting with a chaotic escape route. It also answers why the vital drugs stayed on the counter since their entire operation imploded before anyone even stepped near the fridge. This beautifully details why they desperately fled through the front instead of the rear. Plus, it decodes that bizarre apology claiming ignorance about her frailty because the author is literally confessing to their fatal screw-up. It was that terrifying split second when Nancy ignored their screaming, the exact instant they discovered she was completely deaf, the exact heartbeat when a simple kidnapping morphed into a homicide. Yet there is one chilling detail that should absolutely haunt every detective on this case. If the intruder truly lacked knowledge regarding her deafness, if they honestly had no clue, her ears were useless without batteries, we are looking at a massive hole in their otherwise flawless reconnaissance. They mapped out the security lenses, scoped out the planters, mastered the blueprints, and pinpointed exactly when she'd be flying solo, yet completely missed her profound deafness. This heavily points toward 2 terrifying realities. The mastermind and the muscle clearly weren't the same guy. Whoever planned this hit had deep intel, yet the boots on the ground missed a crucial detail about her deafness, likely because the victim kept her earpieces strictly hidden away in her sleeping quarters and kept her struggles quiet. Regardless, that prescription puzzle shatters the kidnapping narrative completely. Every single angle leads to one undeniable truth. Nobody grabs a hostage for cash and leaves their essential daily pills sitting right there. One solitary plastic bottle abandoned by the sink speaks volumes, revealing way more truth about this nightmare than 60 solid days of police briefings ever could. Let us shift focus to that infamous rucksack which has sparked endless internet theories without anyone actually spotting the glaringly obvious truth. Go back and review that porch camera video. That specific outdoor knapsack looks stuffed to the absolute brim. Yet watch closely as our intruder bends down to blind the lens with a planter that sack barely budges. Utterly failing to drag down his center of gravity, like actual dense gear, absolutely would. The balance remains perfectly centered and suspiciously airy. Whoever packed that gear clearly did not load it down with bulky hardware or metal implements. Forget about typical bondage gear plastic straps or industrial adhesive rolls. That is the classic abduction inventory you would expect to find when the actual goal is keeping a captive alive. Instead, the silhouette screams neatly stacked textiles like a heavy-duty canvas bedding or a large throw. Snatching a living victim for a payout demands proper bindings. You absolutely need specialized gear to lock your prisoner down while moving them. You pack equipment meant for confinement. Taking out a corpse, however, just requires a massive plastic drop cloth. You carry materials designed to swaddle the remains, desperately trying to prevent any gruesome stains from ruining your getaway ride or staining your own flesh. Just analyze that bulky profile. Bulging, yet weightless, perfectly balanced without a single sharp corner, poking through which screams heavily layered synthetic fabrics tucked away. Always neatly. That is no hostage prep, but rather a murder sanitation bundle. Exactly the sort of morbid supply drop carried by a killer who knows their target will never breathe again. Moving on to those planners, we have triple entryways jammed wide open during that fateful midnight. Snatching, someone braced the rear culinary entrance using patio decor. The rear sliding glass was similarly wedged with another ceramic piece. Even the perimeter fence near the vehicle bay got the exact same treatment. Every single blockade utilized the victim's personal garden accessories, snagged blindly and placed flawlessly by an intruder who possessed intimate knowledge of that outdoor layout, completely understanding the heft of those ceramics and the specific entryways requiring an anchor. A prominent primetime anchor verified during her broadcast that our culprit indeed weaponized the homeowner's own landscaping containers to bypass those locks. Nobody hauled these anchors from off-site. These represent classic improvised leverage, blindly snatched up by a phantom who had absolutely stalked those precise grounds previously. That only happens when the blueprint is burned into your brain, letting you grab blindly into pitch blackness and strike immediate gold. Break down the physical logistics here. That rear cooking area features a protective mesh sliding rightward. Our phantom must yank the mesh wide snag, a planter jam it tight, then shove the main entryway ajar while utilizing yet another container for stabilization. Multiple barriers, a single frame, and twin anchors managed flawlessly in zero lighting while racing the clock. You simply cannot fake that on the fly. This invader had absolutely shadowboxed this exact breach, mentally or physically practiced the run during a previous harmless late-night visit. They also forced the lateral fencing wide. That specific barrier borders the carport, identically matching where a key witness claimed to see our victim walking inside on the 31st of January. Opening that latch grants total access straight through the lawn toward the rear entryways. By wedging that latch, the phantom carved out a seamless highway, establishing a frictionless tunnel, stretching from the public pavement right across the turf and straight into the living room. This totally shatters the myth of a frantic, spontaneous burglar. We are looking at a meticulously mapped trajectory, which brings us to the glaring mystery nobody wants to touch. Assuming the blueprint mandated dragging her away via the rear exit, which those jammed entryways essentially prove, how do you explain the gore splattered across the main porch? The whole dynamic flipped upside down. They possessed a solid roadmap involving rear sliders, lateral fencing, scaling the masonry, and slipping away. Then chaos ruined the timeline. Someone living nearby mentioned their hound jolted awake, aggressively howling toward the crime scene during the witching hour. Astonishingly, this same resident experienced a mysterious security blackout exclusively on the lens aimed at the victim's estate. Canines rarely throw random midnight tantrums without cause. That animal definitely locked onto unseen activity, prowling the deep rear of the victim's lot. A shadowy disruption that had zero business being out there. Assuming our ghosts were gearing up for a stealthy rear departure, when that mutt sounded the alarm, the entire tactical equation would shatter in a heartbeat. Howling hounds rip neighbors out of bed. Civilians start peering through blinds and reviewing surveillance feeds. Suddenly, that rear escape becomes a death trap. Retreating through the primary entrance becomes the only viable, audible. They pivoted straight past the interior-released safety grille, slipping right beneath the previously blinded porch lens and stepping onto the welcome mat. During that frantic dash across the main threshold, fresh plasma painted the pavement. The initial extraction meant utilizing the yard. Those crimson droplets screamed that the perpetrators fled through the main avenue. That violent pivot between strategies. The exact split second they trashed the original map reveals precisely when the interior situation spiraled completely out of control. A total wildcard mutated a surgical strike into absolute amateur hour. Whatever sparked that chaos caused a messy, bloody departure on a stoop that should have remained spotless. Let us analyze the actual residents, especially since police insiders verified to national media on March 31st the exact same bombshell a prominent journalist leaked shortly beforehand. Zero indicators of a violent brawl existed within those walls. Investigators actively characterized the living spaces as perfectly pristine. They literally emphasized the word pristine. You will find no smashed mirrors, no flipped couches, zero tossed trinkets, and absolutely nothing suggesting a frantic brawl tore through those halls. The sole forensic breadcrumbs left behind were crimson stains near the welcome mat and those rear entryways wedged wide apart. A seasoned reporter noted this fresh intel aligns perfectly with earlier witness statements, claiming the arriving family members felt utterly confused upon entering the scene. The poor woman had evaporated into thin air. Relatives naturally assumed some severe health crisis, triggered the bizarre scene given those gaping rear exits, painted such a baffling picture. A flawlessly tidy dwelling, zero combat traces, an adult female dragged away barefoot while still wearing her sleepwear. Cell phone abandoned by the bed wallet brimming with forgotten bills. Daily prescriptions left out, patio decor jamming the sliders, and plasma exclusively staining the front stoop. Random home invasions never look like this. This totally fails the sniff test for a frantic, brute force snatching. This screams of an insider navigating the floor plan with such eerie precision that they bypass the usual chaotic ransacking completely. Zero blind groping, zero hunting around, zero bumping into walls. A beeline for the master suite, a direct grab of the target, and an immediate phantom exit. Let me finally bridge those twin locations teased during the opening hook, as my initial monologue set this up perfectly. I originally framed the fueling stop and that disturbing web query as completely isolated clues. Let me explain why their hidden synergy changes the entire game. That specific petrol stop bordering the relative's neighborhood, explicitly the location housing that crypto terminal, boasts way more significance than simple proximity to their front door. Picture a killer's map connecting two specific doors. That exact road links Annie and Tommaso's place directly to NY's property, but that's the property up in the Catalina foothills. You literally cannot miss that service station while cruising by on the night of January 31st, or any other evening for that matter. Locals know exactly what sits inside that shop, the very crypto kiosk demanding the precise digital currency mentioned throughout those threatening extortion letters. Plus, that web query on January 11th didn't merely bounce from Tucson, it tracked back to the exact municipality where someone was physically staking out New York's entryway. We're looking at a deadly overlap of cyberstalking and boots on the ground creeping, all hitting the identical victim from a single regional zone. The person stalking Nancy Guthrie's residence wasn't doom-scrolling from some faraway state. The perpetrator lived nearby, breathed down her neck, and stayed totally vigilant. Let us completely tear apart the kidnapping for cash narrative and see what horrific truth remains. Throwing out that extortion angle flips the entire investigation upside down. Without the payoff element, any monetary incentive for some random outsider completely vanishes into thin air. Random thugs gain nothing here. Why would a complete unknown spend 3 weeks spying disabling security systems just to snatch an 84-year-old lady right out of her own peaceful slumber? Viewing this tragedy as a random break-in feels absurd. Stripping away the kidnapping angle leaves only one terrifying reality: deeply personal reasons. The mastermind desired Nancy dead over family drama, wealth distribution, or dominance, perhaps hiring a hitman to do the dirty work while remaining safely hidden within New York's trusted group. We are witnessing the classic puppet master and henchman dynamic we've debated for ages. Consequently, that reinforced entry barricade suddenly transforms into the investigation's most crucial piece of evidence. A massive iron barricade protected Nancy's main entryway. Laura, a local resident rocking the identical setup, swore to Brian Anon that bypassing those bolted structures is absolutely impossible for any normal intruder. Battering down that defensive grid is practically a myth. She stated that solitary attackers couldn't possibly force their way inside. Burglars cannot pick the mechanism, nor can brute force shatter the sturdy frame. Only an occupant granting access from the interior can bypass that shield. That mysterious figure looming on the doorbell camera recording remained completely stuck outdoors. He never attempted to smash the metal. He avoided using violence entirely. The guy simply lingered on the porch. Eventually, someone cracked the threshold from indoors. While abandoned prescriptions destroy the kidnapping hypothesis, that impenetrable iron fencing basically guarantees we are hunting a treacherous, familiar face. A traitor was lurking indoors beforehand. The accomplice possessed unrestricted clearance, unlocking the barrier from behind closed doors to either welcome the stranger or drag the poor victim right out into the night. Crossing that threshold mandates an insider's assistance. Whoever facilitated the breach was either welcomed by the victim directly or possessed a private key to freely waltz right in. The map continuously zeroes in on a tiny 4-mile perimeter. Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Chion reside roughly 10 minutes away from the residence. They reportedly bid the victim her final known farewell. According to Tommaso, he delivered her home around 9:50 p.m., claiming the car park shut automatically. That remains the final verifiable trace. Video footage completely missed her entering the building. Witnesses saw nothing. Any events occurring past 9:50 p.m. rely solely on Tommaso's word. followed by 14 chilling hours of absolute quiet. Between 9:50 p.m. and midday tomorrow, her mobile received 0 calls or messages. Not one person traveled 4 miles to monitor an 84-year-old cardiac patient who removed her auditory devices inside a dwelling plagued by a mysteriously malfunctioning surveillance system. 14 hours provides absolute freedom. A killer could easily journey over, commit murder, relocate the evidence, bleach the scene, and retreat undetected. Securing that perfect timeline simply requires avoiding the telephone. Curiously, Annie and Tommaso never rang. Furthermore, that cryptocurrency kiosk sits close to their property, and the web browsing matched their hometown. Extortion messages from Derek Kayla pinged Tommaso's private mobile, exclusively bypassing authorities entirely. Meanwhile, Dominic Evans, his musical partner of 19 years, boasts a rap sheet full of stealing and fraud. This associate perfectly matches the federal profile while residing mere minutes from the crime. Detectives impounded Annie's blue Honda SUV for upwards of 40 days, executing an incredibly thorough forensic sweep before releasing it. A 40-day hold is highly abnormal. Waiting 40 days implies detectives hunted for hidden evidence. Suddenly, fresh pictures depict mysterious individuals hauling cardboard cartons out of NY's driveway. All this occurred prior to any official fatality ruling or paperwork being filed. I avoid throwing direct accusations around. I'm simply connecting the geographical dots. The spatial data relentlessly highlights a property located 4 miles away. The corpse was definitely carried off-site. Whenever loved ones commit homicide, they routinely extract the casualty. They aren't trying to mask the killing itself, since biological traces linger anyway. Relocating the corpse distracts authorities, manufacturing the illusion of a random snatching. It forces the police to chase phantoms instead of questioning the grieving family. Domestic murderers follow this incredibly predictable textbook behavior. Faking a kidnapping weaves a deceitful narrative. A shadowy prowler broke in, grabbed her, and vanished. That lie survives only until investigators realize a random prowler couldn't possibly navigate the floor plan with such flawless surgical accuracy in the dead of night. Extortion letters simply enhance the theatrical production. They form a deceptive smokescreen designed to mask the actual motive. Curiously, those initial demands reference secrets exclusively known by close-knit family members. Dropping a remorseful message manipulates grieving relatives, aiming to discourage them from pursuing more aggressive interrogations. That bizarre communication on February 11th attempted to pawn off intel instead of demanding a hostage fee. This sudden shift in intent implies an opportunistic bystander hoped to cash in completely distinct from the primary killer's brutal agenda. Spotting neglected medicine bottles utterly destroys the hostage facade, since authentic abductors consistently pack necessary drugs to keep their victims alive. This perpetrator ignored them. Think about who exonerated the relatives. Ex-attorney Matt Murphy confidently declared recently that he'd risk everything on the culprit being a familiar face, likely someone currently sitting behind bars in Pima County. He labeled the entire police effort a total circus, arguing the Guthries desperately warrant justice. Meanwhile, Sheriff Chris Nanos, the guy who publicly vindicated the relatives, now confronts an April 7th disciplinary tribunal regarding professional misconduct and fabricated career credentials. Local officials legally forced him to swear upon his submissions, as regional leaders completely lost faith in his capacity to tell the truth without facing severe penalties. Picture a lead detective straight up lying about a crucial glove that federal agents already pulled from the crime scene. This same guy fought with 4 massive broadcasting giants over camera footage and shipped biological evidence to some random Florida facility rather than Quantico. He unsealed the property way before federal agents finished their sweeps, let a random maintenance guy stroll through the yard, and mapped out a search grid completely ignoring the Stradiglius lens. Why leak details about the pacemaker tracking tech before it even got a hit? Yet he went on local radio claiming he did absolutely everything perfectly and harbored 0 regrets. This exact official exonerated her relatives, yet his own department demands he testify under penalty of perjury because they suspect he's lying. Meanwhile, the feds are pulling their agents out of Tucson. Retired federal investigator Jason Pack believes that unidentified genetic material belonging neither to Nancy nor her inner circle remains the most crucial clue in this entire mystery. He pointed out that advanced ancestry tracing took down the Golden State Killer and solved mysteries way older than this tragedy. The technology absolutely delivers results. The real issue is whether those lab reports return before the physical samples completely deteriorate. Savannah Guthrie goes back to the Today Show on April 6, just 24 hours prior to that sworn testimony. Her relatives are moving on, but the police work is completely stalled. A kidnapping for cash was the earliest narrative pushed here. Cameron Guthrie floated that idea during his initial dispatch call long before a single letter appeared, or the forensics unit even arrived. That narrative set the stage completely. Relatives made impassioned pleas, posted bounties, and filmed emotional clips entirely based on the premise of a greedy outsider abducting Nancy. However, physical clues have pointed toward a totally different reality for quite a while now. Those abandoned prescriptions sitting out are exactly what tears this whole kidnapping illusion apart. Let us look at the full board again as the combined details paint an undeniable truth. Her crucial prescriptions were completely ignored. Any real abductor would grab those drugs, yet nobody bothered. That captured rucksack held an item packed completely flat, looking exactly like heavy plastic sheeting rather than bindings. You pack a tarp to conceal a corpse while ropes are for living prisoners. The silhouette inside that fabric gives away their true intent. Those planters were snatched right off her personal terrace, late at night, by a suspect holding perfect knowledge of their location. Furthermore, 3 separate entryways were deliberately left unlatched. Their original strategy involved slipping out the rear door. A massive complication obviously happened, forcing them out the main entrance. Finding fresh crimson stains by the threshold proves this detour was a total accident. Inside, everything remained pristine, showing 0 signs of a violent brawl or broken locks. The perpetrator navigated those hallways as if they practically lived under that roof. Those extortion letters included extremely specific facts that only an insider could possibly notice. Knowing about the broken security lamp or where the Apple Watch sat means the author either stood right there or got fed intel by an accomplice. That bizarre remorse letter goes against all established criminal psychology for abductors. It was crafted strictly to offer comfort, completely ignoring the financial demands. Its true objective was steering all mourning away from her immediate circle and selling this total fairy tale about a random mugging gone wrong. That February 11th message landed at TMZ from an alleged neutral source, supposedly reaching out straight to Annie and Cameron instead of bothering with Savannah. That terrifying Derek Kayla extortion text actually pinged Tommaso Cian on his private mobile device. It bypassed Savannah and skipped federal agents to target Tommaso. Kayla operates within the exact same underground Tucson music circles as Tommaso does. Plus that January 11th browser query for her address traced right back to Tucson. That exact service station federal agents investigated featuring the crypto terminal sits just down the street from Annie and Tommaso, not near the victim's property. Furthermore, authorities impounded Annie's vehicle for 40 straight days to conduct a massively thorough forensic teardown. 14 full hours ticked by between Nancy vanishing and anyone finally dialing out to see if she was okay. The individuals creating that massive delay reside merely 4 miles out. Strangely, people are already clearing belongings out of her residence, despite no official death certificate. An intruder definitely snatched Nancy Guthrie from her residence. This culprit fully understood the layout, actively avoided surveillance, and recognized exactly where those garden planters sat. They recognized exactly which entryways to wedge open and which to dodge. They drifted across a spotless residence without knocking a single thing out of place. The suspect carried a bag stuffed with thick plastic. They entirely forgot her life-saving pills. Later on, an individual, perhaps the main suspect, or a close accomplice, sent media letters packed with extremely secret household details. They explicitly requested crypto transfers using an account linked to a kiosk located just a short walk from whoever last saw Nancy breathing. That entire kidnapping angle is completely busted. The evidence destroying it remains untouched on a countertop up in the Catalina foothills. The real truth leads down a dark path her relatives desperately want to keep hidden from public scrutiny. A resident right here in Tucson holds the horrific answers. The forensics prove this perpetrator ran much closer in Nancy's orbit than anybody dared admit on record until today. Smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, and drop a comment below, letting me know if you still believe the abduction myth. My upcoming breakdown tracks the cash flow directly to one very undeniable destination. In moments of fear, people often rush to believe the loudest story. But one of the most important lessons from this case is that truth does not always live in the first explanation. Real understanding comes from patience, careful thinking, and the courage to question what seems obvious. When a family is hurting, rumors, assumptions, and dramatic narratives can spread faster than facts. That is why we must learn to value evidence over emotion, clarity over chaos, and compassion over speculation. A single overlooked detail can change everything. A single false assumption can send people in the wrong direction. This is not just a lesson about one mystery, it is a lesson about life. We should never stop asking honest questions. We should never ignore small details just because they do not fit the popular story. And we should always remember that behind every headline is a human being, a family, and real pain. A responsible society is built on critical thinking and empathy. When we seek truth with both wisdom and heart, we protect justice, honor the vulnerable, and become better people. In a noisy world, choosing truth is an act of courage.